Hello there, music fans. You've stumbled across Slipped Through the Cracks, and this is the very first episode, the debut right here, where me, Dr. Mouth, and my huge mammoth collection of vinyl, we are going to take you through some of the bits and pieces that have gotten forgotten through the years. You know, the stuff that just slipped through the cracks. I mean, we all know about the big name bands. We all know about the greatest bands, the big pop music bands, big rock bands. We know about all that stuff. But what about those other bands that maybe only had one record, 145, and just slipped through the cracks? Well, that's what we're going to talk about on this show. We're not going to review many new albums. You're not going to get a review here of the new Drake album or something like Pink or Taylor Swift or Justin Timberlake. You're not going to get any of that kind of stuff here. This is stuff that slipped through the cracks. I'm a historical kind of guy. I like to look into the past when I like a type of music, and that's what I'm going to do with this show and just go through this vast collection, and it should be really fun, and I think you're going to quite enjoy it. Now, I said all that. I'm going to go through the bands that no one's heard of and records that slipped through the cracks. But now I'm going to start with probably the one band that everybody in the world knows. I'm not going to argue about whether they're the greatest band ever or not. That's for far smarter people than me to argue about. But I will talk about this one that slipped through the cracks to the Beatles all these years until now. Now, if you were a fan of the Beatles in the 1960s and you were a member of their official fan club, which was in the UK, you got a special 45 recording from the Beatles every Christmas. Every Christmas they would send this neat little record. It would have a cool little picture sleeve, and it would be a message from the Beatles to their fans. It was kind of a really cool thing if you were a member of the fan club. And they put one out every year from 1963 to 1969. And then when the Beatles finally broke up in 1970, the record company, the fan club, as a final gesture, did this. They took all the 45s and they put them together on this one album here. This is what the cover looked like right here, and it was called the Beatles Christmas Album. Now, some of you out there might be going, Dr. Mouth, I've never heard of the Beatles Christmas Album. But it's like, no, you haven't, and I would like to know why. I've pondered this question for years and years and years. I mean, they've for so long, they've spent time trying to get new Beatle stuff out there or entice Beatle fans to buy the records again. And, you know, they even started it in the 80s when they did this record, 1980, called Rarities. But there was nothing really rare on it. Some different versions of songs, but nothing that you didn't already know. And people have wanted to get to find rare Beatles stuff forever. There's been countless bootlegs. Look, this one came out after the Rarities, called Casualties, and it was the same kind of idea, mostly different versions of songs by the Beatles, but there were songs that we already knew. The one cool one on this bootleg, actually, is that it has just the backing tracks for I Am the Walrus, which is pretty cool. It's just the organ, the drums, none of the fancy effects are on it yet. It's a very interesting listen to hear I Am the Walrus being basically stripped bare. So people have always wanted to have rare Beatles stuff, and they've never seemed to satisfy us. You know, they had the anthology series, which again really wasn't just anything new, just the same songs, different versions. They did have the Beatles at the BBC, which wasn't bad because you did get to hear them do some covers of songs they had never done before. That was cool. But, you know, and then it's like, we have to do the mono release of all the albums. We have to do the stereo release of all the albums. And then in 2017, because it's the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper, they have to do a new mix of Sgt. Pepper and then put out a whole bunch of the early versions of all the songs that are on the records. But while those are fascinating to listen to maybe once to hear how they put things together, it's not something new. It's not something that we haven't heard before, and it's not something that's maybe been missing. Well, the Beatles' Christmas singles always were. I could never understand. I thought, why don't you put these out? They haven't been heard since the 60s. I mean, and think of how hard it is to get a copy of the record. I mean, my copy of the record, this one, it's a bootleg. It's a bootleg I bought when I was in high school. So these records have been sought after, and I could just never figure out, why don't you put these out? Well, finally, I guess maybe it was the 50-year thing for Sgt. Pepper. I don't know. But finally this year, they did it. here it is. This is what they've done for the vinyl head anyways. I'm sure they've put this out on CD too. But this is a box containing all the original, well, not originals, but new versions of the original singles, all repackaged in their original sleeves, as they show here on the back. And they, for this one, for the boxing, because gimmicks are all the rage nowadays, they did every one with colored vinyl. So there you go. I got this from a friend of mine for Christmas this year, and I thought since this is the first episode of Slipped Through the Cracks, it might be fun if I wait and I'll open it right here in front of you all while you're watching this. So that's what I'm going to do. It's pretty cool. I also kind of thought it would be neat if they did it in the album version, much like the one I showed you earlier, and put that out. Maybe they still will. Like I said, I don't even know what they're doing for the CD versions. Don't ask me about stuff like that because I don't know. I got to be careful with the plastic, though, because I have this thing where any kind of sticker, like you see there's a little sticker on the outside of this one, any kind of sticker that's on it, I always want to try to take those off and save them in some way. I'm kind of anal that way. I want to have everything that goes with it. So let's open this baby up here. Let's see. What do we got inside? Okay, so first off, there's a booklet, which is pretty cool. So this probably talks about the history of the... Yeah, some good pictures of them here with the newsletters. These are probably the backs of the sleeves with the write-ups and newsletters. Okay, so that's cool. And then we have the 45s in here. Oh, they even sealed each one of them. Wow. And they're in order. So I'll just go through them real quick. This was the first year, 63, 64, 65. This is where they start to get good, 66. Psychedelic. 67, of course. Kind of looking like either the cover of Disraeli Gears or Sgt. Pepper. 68. Woo! And 69. Wow. And it's kind of, it's so, like, one of the reasons I always thought it would be so good for them to put these 45s out, or put the Beatles Christmas record out, is because we've had all these documentaries. Ron Howard did his movie about the early days of the Beatles, and there's been countless documentaries made on television and for the internet and the 500 channel universe. But this really is such a great documentary of their career because it's a glimpse into where they were at headspace-wise in each year. And you can see the changes. Like, look, here's the first one. They're all nice, cheery. They're all together. They've signed it. They're playing the game. Everything. By the end, look at this. It's like this really kind of represents the chaos that was going on in the band at the exact same time. I mean, look at that. It's just crazy. And as you listen to the 45s, the early ones, it's got them talking, greeting the fans, saying thanks for buying our records, thanks for going to see the films, thanks for coming to the concerts. And then by the pantomime one there in 66, that's when they start to actually do really crazy musical collages and really weird little bizarre kind of Monty Python style skits and that kind of stuff. And it's really, really fun to listen to. But then, you get into 68 and 69, they don't like each other so much at this point. So it's like they're all doing their parts individually. Yoko's there with John now. Like none of them are doing anything together. So it's really astounding. I think it's an amazing, cool history of them. And if you haven't heard them before, you should check this out. I'm sure it's available. I'm sure you can go download it and however you kind of do those things. I don't do that anymore. I just play these things behind me. So there you go. The Beatles and the Christmas album finally available. If you're a Beatle fan, I think and you haven't heard them before, you definitely want to check it out. All right, that's it. I'm going to skip on out of here. Dr. Mouth, thanks for joining me here on the initial edition of Slipped Through the Cracks. And that's it. Be here next time where we'll go through more of this vinyl vault.